Hey Fusion enthusiasts! In this video I want to show you how you can start a new Fusion design that you will base around some concept images. So I've got some 2D just sketched images here. If I flip to preview, you can see what they look like. So it's just a front view and a side view, and I want to base my design around that. So I'll go to File, New Design, start a blank canvas, and I want to first go to the Insert pull down and insert an attached canvas. So this lets me bring an image onto a plane. So I'm going to select the plane that I want, browse out to my image. So this was called front, and it comes in pretty small. So let's do some tweaking here to get it what we need. So I'm going to scale it up. I want to set the opacity, so I'm going to set this to about 50%. That lets me see through it, but lets me see enough of it that I can model around. I also want to set the display through option, so I'll turn that on. That will let the image show through any geometry that's in front of it. And I will make sure that selectable is off, so that way as I'm creating and editing geometry, I can't accidentally pick the image. All right, so my settings look good. I'm going to click OK, and you'll notice there's our sketch in Fusion, and in the browser you can see I have canvases, and there's my front view. Now what I want to do is make sure this is sized appropriately. So I'll use Calibrate, and that lets me pick 2 points on the image. So I'm going to pick the 2 widest points of the shaver body here, and I know that should be about 50 mil. All right, so now my front image is positioned and sized appropriately. So I'm going to repeat the process. So I'll go to Attached Canvas, pick the side plane, browse to my right image. And again, it comes in small and rotated incorrectly, but that's easy to change. So I'm going to scale it up, spin it 90 degrees. I want to go back and set my opacity and display through settings like we did before. And now instead of using Calibrate, I'm going to scale this and position it based on the front image. So I know that the 2 edges there should line up, so I'm going to scale a little bit. I'm going to move it a little bit. And let's rotate around. That looks pretty good. All right, this is probably a good point to save the file. And because this was a new file, when I save it, it'll prompt for a name and a project to save in. Saves after this just create new versions, just like you would any other application. Okay, now that I've got my images, I'm going to start creating some geometry. So looking at this, it's pretty curved. I probably want to use the Sculpt tools. So I'm going to create form to get to my Sculpt tools. And this looks somewhat cylindrical, so I'm going to start with a cylinder. Pick the face to put it on. Pick a center for my cylinder. Pick another point to define the diameter. So again, I'm using my images to size this correctly. Now let's give the cylinder a height and drag it out, and I've done this a few times. I know I want it to be about 80 millimeters. Oh, wrong way. I want it to be negative 80 millimeters. And I need more than 4 faces, so I'm going to drag the slider, and I know I need about 6 faces to get this shape. All right, well, I've got a cylinder. How do I get that in the shape of that shaver body? And what I'm going to do is use Edit Form and start rotating and scaling faces and edges. I can window select, and I'm going to rotate that around. I'll click in a blank area to clear my selection, and window select again to get some other faces. Oop, and that's not correct. Let me select again. And let's window down there to get, there we go. That looks good. Rotate again, scale, rotate and translate. And now we've got this at kind of an awkward angle, so let's try the paint selection to grab my faces. So what I can do with paint is click and drag over faces and edges to select those rather than using a window. So again, rotate, translate, pick to clear, drag to select more, rotate, translate, and it's starting to take shape. So I'm going to go back to Window Select, and now I'm going to double click some rings or some edges to get the entire ring. Hold Shift to select multiple and start scaling to get these the right size. So scale and translate. So double click to get a ring, scale it, I'm going to rotate that ring, and I'm going to keep on picking and clicking through here. If you don't want to see all the picks and clicks to get this shape, what you can do is skip to about the 8.5 minute mark where I finish form to finish up this body. So now what I'm doing is selecting and moving some edges. So rather than grabbing an entire face, I'm going to window select and get some edges. And this is a more fine detail. So I'm just grabbing single edges instead of an entire ring, moving around. And again, you can see I'm using the concept image that I've placed in here to determine where to position objects. All right, so now I'm looking at this, and I think my side view looks pretty good. But if I rotate around, my front view is a little bit off. And I'm just going to do the same thing. Use Edit Form. And let's grab some faces. So I can window select to grab a bunch of faces. I can select individual edges to do some finer editing. And I can rotate. That's not the right edge. I need that. The bottom edge, yep, that's the one. Move it down a little bit. And one thing I just noticed is I needed symmetry here. So if I move these faces on the right, you can see the faces on the left aren't changing with it. And I could have done that when I created the model. I forgot, but that's okay. I can go to the symmetry pull down. And I'll use Mirror Internal. So what that does is it adds symmetry to the existing faces. So I'll pick one side, pick the other, and that green edge there shows where the mirror happens. So now what's going to happen is when I make changes on the right side of the body, the left side will adjust as well. All right, so we're almost there. I just need to make this, add that kind of tapered effect. So I'm going to grab a bunch of faces. Let's rotate, translate, and that looks pretty good there. All right, so starting to take shape. I like the way this form looks, so I'm going to turn off my concept images. And Finish Form takes me out of the Sculpt tools, and now I'm going to just start doing some more manufacturing type features. And the first thing I'll notice is that this is an open body, right? I don't have a cap on either end, so I'm going to go to Patch to create those caps. So this one's easy. It's got to be a flat face, so I just pick the edge and say OK. And if we look at bodies, I have two surface bodies. And now I'm going to cap off the bottom, and in this case I want that rounded edge, so or rounded face. So when I pick the edge, I'm going to set my continuity to curvature, and I get that nice curved surface. And then I can stitch these all together to make it a solid. So the red edges show open areas, and I didn't pick the bottom one quite right. Let's pick, there we go. The green edges show where it'll actually be stitched to a solid, or where they connect. So now you see I have a solid body there. And all this is recorded in my timeline too, you'll notice at the bottom. Now I'm going to go to Model to do some manufacturing features. So I want to shell this. I'm going to shell it. I'm going to open up that face, give it a 1.5 millimeter thickness. And this should be a left and a right half, so I'm going to split this body into two pieces. So split, I'm going to use the origin plane. Click OK. And you see now I have a left half and a right half. And what's very cool with the timeline is if I double click my form, that takes me back to the T-spline body I was working on originally. And maybe I want this to be thinner, or I just want to see what it looks like if it was thinner. So I can go in, edit form, and I'm going to scale down looking at the right view. I'm going to go to the front view and scale. And I can already tell I don't like this, but let's see it through. So I can finish form. My operations are recalculated, and you can see my design updates. So that's an introduction to how to start a Fusion design using some concept images.